The winter wind bit through the city like a blade, rattling the shutters of old buildings and whispering through streets lined with for sale signs. Somewhere in the crowd of grey faces, a man walked with his collar turned up and his head bowed low, as if hiding from the world. His name no longer mattered to most. Once, he had been a name people trusted, a man whose voice could move markets. But trust is fragile. A single misstep can turn admiration into rage, and rage into ruin. He knew that truth intimately. He passed a bakery where the smell of warm bread spilled onto the sidewalk, but he didn't stop. He hadn't bought himself a treat in months, not since the collapse, not since the families whose savings vanished because they believed in him, because he promised them security, because he thought he was too clever to fail. He pulled his coat tighter. The memory stung more than the cold. That night, in his small apartment, the silence pressed down heavy. The radiator clanked like an old man coughing, and the walls were stained with years of smoke and dust. He lit no lights, preferring the shadows. Shadows forgave. In the dark, he could almost believe he hadn't been the architect of others' misery. Almost. Down the hall, voices rose, neighbors arguing, a baby crying, a mother pleading for quiet. He tried to shut it out, but something about the tone caught his ear. Desperation. He knew it well. When morning came, curiosity pulled him toward the voices. He found her at the mailbox, clutching a stack of envelopes with trembling hands. A woman, maybe early 30s, hair tied back, coat frayed at the sleeves. A child clung to her side, his small backpack patched in 3 places. The woman's lips pressed into a tight line as she sorted through the bills, her eyes glistening before she quickly blinked away the tears. "Late again," she muttered, not noticing him nearby. "They'll take it from us. I can't let that happen." The boy tugged her sleeve. "Mom, are we gonna have to move?" She forced a smile. "No, sweetheart. I'll figure it out." He felt the words slice through him. They were words he had once dismissed with a wave of a hand. Words spoken by people who begged him for leniency when payments slipped. He used to assure them it was just business. Now he stood in their place, invisible, hearing the echoes of the pain he caused. The child's backpack slipped, scattering crayons and a tattered notebook across the floor. He bent down instinctively, gathering them before the boy could. Their eyes met small, curious eyes staring up at a man weathered by regret. "Thank you," the mother said quickly, almost embarrassed. "We're fine." He nodded, handing the crayons back, but he wasn't fine. The encounter lingered with him all day. At night, when sleep refused to come, he heard again the strain in her voice, the quiver she tried to hide from her son. He knew the sound of someone drowning quietly. The next morning, he lingered by the stairwell. The woman hurried past, clutching the boy's hand. A final notice peeked from her purse, the red letters, impossible to miss. She caught him looking, her eyes narrowing as if to warn him not to pry. Still, the words tumbled from him before he could stop them. "You're behind on the mortgage." She froze. "Excuse me?" He realized his mistake. He had spoken like the man he once was, cold, clinical. "I mean, I overheard yesterday. The letters. I'm sorry. None of my business." Her jaw tightened. "You're right. It's not." She pulled her son closer and walked away quickly. He stood there, ashamed, yet he couldn't shake the weight pressing on his chest. He had seen too many faces like hers, desperate and cornered. Faces he had ignored while climbing higher. This was different. He couldn't ignore it now, not when the chance to act was staring him in the eye. That evening, as he returned from the grocery store with a single bag, he saw her again, sitting on the building's front steps. The boy was asleep on her shoulder, his small frame curled against her. Her hand covered her face, muffling quiet sobs. Something cracked inside him. A wall he had built long ago. He set his bag down and spoke gently. "It's hard carrying it alone." She looked up, startled, eyes red. "I don't need pity. I wasn't offering pity," he said softly. "Just, I know what it's like to lose everything." She studied him for a moment, suspicion mingling with exhaustion. "You don't know me, no, but I recognize that look." His voice faltered, honest in its weakness. "I wore it myself once, every day since the collapse." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Only the distant hum of traffic filled the air. "Finally," she whispered, "they're taking the house. End of the month. I've tried everything." He sat down a few steps below her, leaving space. Sometimes, everything still isn't enough. "Just to Rang," she clutched her son tighter, her voice breaking. "I can't let him grow up with nothing. I promised him." The words echoed his own memories, the promises he had broken to others, the empty reassurances that cost people their homes, their futures. His chest tightened. He didn't say more. Not yet. But inside him, something stirred. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the faint flicker of redemption. Whatever it was, it refused to let him walk away. The following days dragged like heavy chains. He tried to mind his own business, but the echo of her voice lingered in his ears. Each night, when he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's small hand gripping his mother's sleeve, saw the bills clutched tight, saw the way she tried to hide her breaking point. He told himself he had no place in their struggle. He was a stranger, a man stained by choices that still haunted him. Who was he to step in? What could he even offer? He had no money left, no influence, nothing but scars. Yet the thought wouldn't leave him. Maybe, for once, it wasn't about what he had. Maybe it was about what he could choose to do. On the third evening, he saw her again. She stood at the landlord's office door on the ground floor, her back stiff, her son holding onto her hand. The landlord, a man with sharp features and a gold watch, shook his head before she even finished speaking. "You're out at the end of the month," the landlord said flatly. "No extensions." "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I just need a little more time. I've got extra shifts. I can..." "No." The man's tone was ice. "Rules are rules. You pay, or you leave. That's it." He closed the door, leaving her standing in the dim hallway, with tears glistening in her eyes. The boy looked up at her, confused. She forced a smile, brushing his hair back with trembling fingers. "It's okay, sweetheart. Don't worry." He couldn't stay silent. He stepped out from the stairwell shadows. He won't listen. He never does. She turned sharply, startled. "You again?" "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I wasn't spying." "You just what?" Her eyes narrowed, defensive. "You think you can solve this? You think you know what it's like?" "Yes," he answered simply, his voice firm with a weight she hadn't heard before. "I do." The hallway was silent except for the hum of a flickering light above them. "I lost everything once," he continued. "Not just money, people, families. Because of me, I ruined lives." His throat tightened, but he forced himself to go on. "I can't change that. But maybe I can stop one more family from falling apart." Foreman. Her suspicions softened, but only slightly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because sometimes the only way forward is to face someone who knows the same darkness." The boy shifted closer to his mother, studying him with wide eyes. She hesitated. Trust didn't come easily. not when the world had already shown her its cruelty. But there was something raw in his words, something that didn't sound like pity or empty promises. It sounded like confession. "I don't want your charity," she whispered. "It's not charity," he said. "It's redemption. For me, maybe for both of us." She looked away, her hand tightening on her son's shoulder. "Even if I believed you, even if you wanted to help, what could you possibly do? Do you have the money?" He shook his head slowly. "No, not anymore." "Then what good are you?" she asked, her words sharp, but her voice trembling with the sting of despair. He had no answer. Not yet. That night, in his apartment, he sat staring at the cracked ceiling. Memories washed over him. Faces of investors who trusted him. Families who had begged for leniency. Men and women who had looked at him with hope and left broken. He had buried those memories for years. But now, they rose, demanding something. Action. He pulled out an old box from beneath his bed. Inside were fragments of a life he thought he had left behind. Ledgers, notes, scraps of contracts. And at the bottom, a single journal filled with names. People he had wronged. People who had lost because of him. His fingers traced the ink as guilt pressed against his chest. Maybe he couldn't erase the past. But perhaps one of these names could give him a way to help her. Maybe some thread of connection remained. A debt he could still repay in the only way that mattered now. The next morning, he found her in the stairwell, hurrying out with her son for school. He stopped her gently. "I don't have money," he admitted. "But I have something else. I know people. Old connections. They're not friends. Not anymore. But maybe I can find someone willing to give you a chance." She shook her head. "I can't take risks with strangers. My son deserves better than that." He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "And he deserves better than losing his home. Let me try. If I fail, then nothing changes. But if I succeed..." He let the words hang, heavy with possibility. She hesitated, caught between pride and desperation. Finally, she whispered, "One chance. That's it." He nodded. "That's all I need." For the first time in years, he felt purpose ignite in his veins, not for profit, not for power, but for the fragile hope of keeping a roof over a boy's head. And maybe for a chance to forgive himself. He sat at his kitchen table with the journal open, the names staring back at him like ghosts. Some had been business partners, others victims of his reckless ambition. Each page carried stories he didn't want to remember. But now those stories might hold the only threads left to pull. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone. The first call went unanswered. The second ended with a curse and a slammed line. By the fifth attempt, his voice was hoarse and his chest ached with the weight of rejection. On the sixth call, a man finally answered. "I don't know why you're calling me." The voice snapped after hearing his name. "You cost me everything. I lost my house, my marriage." "I know," he whispered, gripping the phone tightly. "I can't undo what I did. But I'm asking for one thing, not for me. For a woman who's about to lose her home. She has a boy. She has nothing." Silence stretched on the other end. Then, a bitter laugh. "You think you get to play hero now? Too late for that." The line went dead. He sat in the silence of his apartment, his jaw clenched. Maybe this was hopeless. Maybe redemption was a fantasy. But then he remembered the boy's eyes, wide and trusting despite the world's cruelty. He remembered the mother's voice cracking when she whispered, "I don't want your charity." That memory pushed him to try again. He opened the journal to another name. This one hurt more than the rest. A man who had once called him brother-in-arms during their early days of building dreams together. A man he had betrayed with lies and broken deals. With trembling hands, he dialed the number. It rang once, twice, and then, "Hello?" The voice was older, rougher, but unmistakable. He swallowed hard. "It's me. It's me." Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "You've got some nerve calling this number. I wouldn't if it wasn't important. What could possibly be more important than the people you ruined? This isn't about me. It's about someone else. A woman. She's about to lose her home. She has a child. She needs help." The man scoffed. "And why should I care? Why should anyone care about your sob story? Because I don't want another child to grow up homeless because of men like me. Because I can't watch it happen again. Please. I don't deserve your help. But she does." For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of static on the line. Then the man spoke, softer this time. "You sound different. Almost human." "I'm trying to be," he whispered. A sigh came through the receiver. "I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. Send me her details. If I can't help directly, maybe I know someone who can." His throat tightened. "Thank you. That's all I ask." When he hung up, his heart pounded. It wasn't a victory, but it was a crack in the wall, a glimmer of possibility. The next evening, he knocked on her door. She opened cautiously, her son peeking out from behind her leg. "Well?" she asked, her tone wary. "I spoke to someone. An old acquaintance. He might know a way. No promises, but it's a start." She crossed her arms, skepticism written across her face. "Why are you doing this?" "Really?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because I can't stand by anymore. Because I know what it's like to destroy lives. And for once, I want to save one." Her expression softened, just slightly, as if she wanted to believe but didn't dare. "And what happens if you fail?" "Then I fail. But not because I didn't try." "Try." She studied him, her eyes searching for cracks in his resolve. Finally, she stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was small, the walls bare, the furniture worn. But it was warm, lived in, filled with the faint scent of home-cooked meals. Her son sat on the couch with a toy car, watching the stranger with cautious curiosity. "You don't have to do this," she said, pouring a glass of water for him. "I don't even know your name." He hesitated before answering. "Maybe it's better that way." She frowned. "You think hiding makes you noble? If you're really trying to help, then be honest. Who are you?" He stared at the glass of water in his hands, seeing his reflection ripple in the surface. A man who once thought money mattered more than people. A man who was wrong. She didn't press further, though her eyes said she wanted to. Instead, she asked quietly, "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing," he said firmly. "Not a thing. If this works, it's yours. If it doesn't, then you'll never hear from me again." She phalanx stand of last ace. The boy climbed onto his mother's lap, whispering something in her ear. She smiled faintly, kissed the top of his head, and looked back at him. "One chance. That's all you get." He nodded. "That's all I need." So, that night, for the first time in years, he felt something flicker inside him. Not relief, not forgiveness, but the first fragile step toward both. 2 days later, his phone buzzed with a number he hadn't seen in over a decade. He almost let it ring out of fear, but something told him this was the moment he had been waiting for. He answered cautiously. Voice on the other end was clipped, impatient. "I looked into your situation, about the woman and her kid." His grip on the phone tightened. There's a fund. Private. Quiet. I know the man who manages it. He owes me a favor. If I call it in, he can cover her debt. Enough to keep her in the house. His heart surged with relief, but the man's voice hardened. But there's a catch. Of course there was. There was always a catch. You'll have to meet him. Face to face. He doesn't move money without looking into the eyes of the one making the request. And trust me, he'll recognize you. He doesn't forgive easily. The air in the room felt heavier. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the chair. If that's what it takes, I'll do it. You'd better mean that, the man replied. Because this isn't just business. For him, it's personal. The call ended, leaving him staring at the phone in silence. His pulse throbbed in his temples. He had wanted redemption, but he hadn't expected to walk back into the fire he once started. That evening, he told her. She stood frozen in the doorway, arms crossed tightly. As he explained, "So this fund," she said slowly. "It depends on a man you betrayed?" "Yes, and you're just going to walk into his office, ask for money, and expect him to hand it over." "I don't expect anything. I just know it's the only shot." She shook her head in disbelief. "This is insane. What if he decides to punish you instead?" He gave a bitter smile. "Then maybe I deserve it. But at least you'll still have a chance." She stared at him for a long time, her expression torn between anger and something softer she couldn't hide. "Why are you willing to risk this much?" He hesitated, then answered simply, "Because I ruined enough families. I won't let yours be next." The silence between them grew heavy, interrupted only by the boy's laughter from the other room. She finally exhaled, shaking her head. "You're impossible, maybe," he admitted. "But I'm not giving up." The meeting was set for the following evening, in a glass tower overlooking the city. He dressed in his only suit, one that hadn't seen daylight since the courtrooms and bankruptcy hearings. The fabric hung loose on him now, a reminder of how far he had fallen. He arrived early, standing outside the building with his reflection glimmering in the sleek windows. Memories clawed at him, long nights spent inside offices like these, chasing numbers while ignoring the people those numbers crushed. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, he was ushered into a vast office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city below, glowing with the lights of lives he once believed he controlled. Behind a polished desk sat the man, older now, hair silver at the temples, but his eyes still sharp, still cold. "Well, look who it is," the man said, his voice smooth with contempt. The ghost of a failure. He forced himself to stand tall, though his knees ached to buckle. "I didn't come for me." "Oh, I know," the man replied, leaning back in his leather chair. "Your old friend told me. A woman, a child, touching." He let the word drip with sarcasm. "You always had a talent for selling stories." "This isn't a story," he said firmly. "It's their life. They're days away from being out on the street." The man's gaze hardened. "And why should I care? You never cared when it was me. When my accounts bled because of you. When my wife left because of the stress you caused. You destroyed me. And now you want me to save someone else." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Because if you do, it won't be for me. It'll be for her. For a boy who's never had a chance." The man rose from his chair, walking slowly around the desk until they stood face to face. He was taller, broader, and carried the confidence of someone who had rebuilt from ashes. "Give me one good reason," he growled, "why I shouldn't call security and have you thrown out of here." For a moment, his mind was blank. Then, quietly but firmly, he answered, "Because you know what it feels like to lose everything, and you wouldn't want that for a child." The man's eyes narrowed, searching his face for weakness, for insincerity. Minutes passed like hours. Then, without a word, he walked back to his desk, picked up the phone, and dialed. "This is me. Approve the transfer." "Yes. To the account I'll send." "Urgent." He hung up, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said finally, his breath caught. The man's jaw tightened. "Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. I did it because once, long ago, I had a daughter, and for 1 second, I let myself imagine her in that woman's shoes. That was enough." He nodded slowly, emotion rising in his chest. "Then I'll never forget this. See that you don't." The man snapped. "Now get out. If I ever see you here again, I won't be so merciful." He left the office, his legs weak, his heart pounding. Outside, the city lights blurred as tears filled his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt the faintest flicker of redemption, not for himself, but for someone else. When he reached her street, the weight of what had just happened still clung to him like a second skin. His shoes scuffed against the pavement as if each step carried the residue of the confrontation upstairs. By the time he stood before her door, his throat was dry, his hands clammy. He knocked softly. The door opened, and she stood there, arms folded, eyes wary. "You're back," she said. Not warmly, not coldly, just flat, as if bracing herself for disappointment. He nodded. "Can we talk?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in to the familiar worn couch, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. The boy's laughter floated in from the next room, tugging at his chest. He turned to her, trying to steady his voice. "It's done. The debt, the house. You're safe now." She frowned, her brow furrowing. "What are you talking about?" "I found a way. A fund. They've approved the transfer. The foreclosure won't happen." She stared at him as though he had spoken in riddles. "Just like that? Just like that?" "Yes." Her eyes narrowed. "And what's the cost?" "Men like you don't just walk into miracles." He felt the sting in her words, but he didn't flinch. "The cost was mine. I had to face someone I hurt years ago, someone who had every reason to turn me away. He didn't." She crossed her arms tighter, suspicion radiating from her. "So, let me get this straight. You waltz into the life of a woman you barely know. You confront an enemy from your past. And somehow I'm supposed to believe he just gave you enough money to save my house? It wasn't like that." He lowered his voice. "He did it because he imagined his own daughter in your place. It wasn't about me. It was about you. About your boy." Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Why are you doing this? Why do you even care?" The question lodged deep inside him, because he had asked himself the same thing every night since meeting her. He exhaled slowly, "Because I ruined too many lives. And if there's even one I can help, one I can set right, then maybe, just maybe, it means I'm not beyond saving." The room was quiet. The boy's small footsteps pattered down the hall, and he peeked around the corner, clutching a toy car. "Mum?" She forced a smile for him. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back and play." When the boy disappeared, her gaze returned to the man standing in her living room. "You expect me to believe you've changed?" "No," he admitted. "I expect you to doubt me. I doubt myself every day. But I didn't do this for gratitude. I did it because you and your son don't deserve to pay for my sins." She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time since he met her, her composure cracked. Her shoulders shook, and a muffled sob escaped. He hesitated, then sat across from her, keeping his distance. "It's over," he said gently. You won't lose your home. Her voice was muffled through her hands. Do you know what it's like to tuck your child in at night and not know if tomorrow you'll still have a roof over your heads? Yes, he whispered. Not with a child, but I know what it's like to fear everything slipping away. She looked up, her eyes red and glistening. Why should I trust you? Don't, he said. Trust the fact that the papers will arrive. You'll see for yourself. It's real. Silence stretched between them, heavy yet fragile, like a bridge half built. Finally, she rose, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. If this is true, she said softly, then you didn't just save a house. You saved a childhood. The words struck him harder than any accusation ever had. He swallowed the lump in his throat. That's all I wanted. The boy returned again, tugging at his mother's sleeve. Mommy, can we play outside? She smoothed his hair, her voice steadier now. In a little while, the man stood, adjusting his jacket. I'll go. You don't need me here. She looked at him, conflicted. For a moment, her mouth opened as if to say something, but then she closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." And well, make story, it wasn't trust. But it was a crack in the wall. As he stepped outside, the evening air felt cooler, almost cleansing. The weight of his past wasn't gone, but for the first time, it felt lighter, as though he had shifted a stone from someone else's back onto his own shoulders. Across the street, neighbors were returning from work, carrying groceries, chatting with one another. Normal lives he had once scorned and lost. Now, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was earning the right to stand among them again. He walked slowly down the block, his chest tight but his spirit steadier. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something fragile and precious in its shadow. And tonight, for the first time in years, he felt like he had taken a step toward it. The papers arrived 2 days later in a thick white envelope with embossed lettering. She stood at the kitchen counter, staring at it as though it were a snake that might bite. Her son tugged at her sleeve, asking for breakfast, but her hands shook as she tore the seal. Her eyes scanned the pages once, then again. Her breath caught, stamped approval, payment confirmed, mortgage reinstated. She wasn't losing the house. She pressed the papers to her chest and sank into the chair, tears streaming down her face. Her boy watched curiously. "Mummy, are you okay?" She nodded, forcing a smile through her tears. "I'm okay, sweetheart. We're okay." Later that afternoon, she saw him outside the corner store. He was leaning against the wall, smoking a cigarette he hadn't lit, just rolling it between his fingers. She approached cautiously. "It's true," she said. "The house, it's safe." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Told you." Her eyes softened, though wariness lingered. "Why me? Out of all the people you could have helped, why did you choose me?" He looked away, the cigarette still spinning between his fingers. "Because you reminded me of what I destroyed. Families, children, people just trying to survive. You showed me what I'd taken for granted. And maybe I thought helping you was the first step to being human again." She studied him, searching for cracks in his words. But all she found was exhaustion, an exhaustion that seemed carved into his bones. "Then you've done it," she whispered. "At least for us." For a moment, there was silence, a fragile truce between them. But then a car screeched around the corner, drawing both their attention. 2 men stepped out, suits too sharp, shoes too polished. Their eyes locked onto him, He stiffened instantly, she noticed. Who are they? Trouble, he muttered. The men crossed the street with calculated calm, their gazes never leaving him. One of them smirked. Well, look who crawled out of his hole. He straightened, the air around him tightening. This isn't your business anymore. Sue, oh, but it is. The man's grin widened. You think you can erase years of ruin with a single good deed. You owe debts that don't vanish with signatures. Rennie, the woman glanced between them, confusion and dread creeping over her. What are they talking about? He clenched his jaw. Nothing you need to worry about. But she didn't move. Not until you tell me. The second man stepped forward, his voice sharp. He doesn't tell you because he doesn't want you to know. Every family he ruined, every life he crushed, it wasn't just numbers on a page. It was blood in the streets. People still want payback. Her breath hitched, the papers in her hand suddenly feeling heavier. She looked at him, searching for denial. Instead, his silence screamed the truth. Is it true? She whispered. His eyes met hers, and the regret in them was louder than any words. Yes, the men chuckled darkly. You see, he plays savior now, but he can't wash the dirt off his hands. He's a marked man, and anyone standing beside him will be marked too. Her grip on the papers tightened. Fear crawled through her veins. She had fought so hard to keep her son safe, and now the man who had just saved their home threatened to bring danger straight to her doorstep. Leave, she said, her voice shaking. Both of you, just leave. The men laughed, turning back to their car. We'll be seeing you again, one of them said, smirking. Redemption doesn't come cheap. As the car roared away, silence returned, heavier than before. She turned to him, eyes blazing. You brought this into my life, into my son's life. I never wanted, you never thought, she snapped. You show up, you play hero, and now men are threatening me in the street. Do you know what it's like to live in fear every day? Yes, he said, his voice rough. Every damn day. She shook her head, stepping back. I can't do this. I can't let my boy be dragged into your past. I don't care what you did for us. You can't be near us anymore. Her words sliced deeper than she knew. He wanted to protest, to beg her to see that he had meant no harm. But the sight of her clutching the mortgage papers against her chest, shielding them like a shield, stopped him. He nodded slowly. If that's what you want. She didn't answer. She turned and walked back toward her house, her boy running to meet her at the door. He stood there on the sidewalk, the cigarette still in his hand, unlit as the evening shadows stretched long. He had saved her home, but lost her trust. He had taken one step forward, only to be shoved 2 steps back. As he walked away into the night, the question burned inside him. Could redemption survive when the ghosts of the past refused to stay buried? The night swallowed him as he walked away, but the echoes of her words stayed lodged in his chest like broken glass. He had saved her home, yes, but he had also dragged danger to her doorstep. For hours, he wandered the streets, hands in his pockets, replaying the look in her eyes when she told him to stay away. By morning, he was back in his small rented room, above a shuttered pawn shop. He sat at the table, staring at a notebook filled with names. Old debts, old enemies, people who wouldn't let him forget. He closed the book with a snap. For the first time in years, he wanted to run. But then he thought of her boy's laughter, of the way the child had clung to her hand when she told him they were safe, and he knew he couldn't. Meanwhile, at her house, she tried to return to normal. She served breakfast, packed her son's lunch, kissed him on the forehead before school, but her hands trembled as she locked the door. Every shadow on the street seemed longer. Every car that slowed made her heart pound. She told herself she'd been through worse. But deep down, she knew the truth. Fear had crept inside her walls again. 2 days passed before the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the door. She froze, heart racing. Her son looked up from his toys, curious. She tiptoed to the peephole, breath shallow. It was him. She almost didn't open it, but his face, tired, unshaven, desperate, made her turn the lock. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice sharp but hushed. "I had to warn you," he said quickly. "Those men, they won't stop. They've been following me for weeks. But now that they've seen you, you're part of it. They'll use you to get to me." Her stomach churned. "Then why are you here? You're the reason they even know I exist. Because I can't let them touch you," he snapped, his voice breaking with something between anger and fear. "You think I don't know what I did? You think I don't carry it every second? But this I can fix." She stared at him, her son tugging at her leg, sensing the tension. The man's eyes softened as he glanced at the boy. "Please," he whispered, "let me protect you. Just this once." Her instinct screamed to slam the door, to shut him out forever. But another part of her, the part that remembered the approval letter, the saved home, the strange peace she'd felt when her son slept without worry, hesitated. Finally, she exhaled. "If you're staying, you don't make the rules. I do. No lies. No disappearing. You tell me everything, even the things I don't want to hear. Do you understand?" He nodded, relief flickering across his face. "I understand." That night, he sat at her kitchen table while her son slept upstairs. He told her everything about the investors he had ruined, the partners who had turned on him, the debts that had driven him to prison. He spoke of greed, of arrogance, of believing he was untouchable until the collapse came and left ruins in its wake. She listened, silent, her hands folded tight. When he finished, the room felt heavier. But there was something new in her eyes, something between anger and pity. "You're right," she said finally. "You can't erase what you did, but maybe you can stop adding to the damage." He lowered his gaze. "That's all I want." The following morning, the threat made itself known. A black car idled across the street, its engine humming. 2 men sat inside, dark glasses hiding their eyes. Her son pointed at it as they left for school. "Mom, why is that car there?" She forced a smile. "Just neighbors visiting," she lied. But her pulse hammered as she hurried him along. Inside the house, the man watched through the curtains. His jaw tightened. "They're watching, waiting for me to slip. Then we call the police." She insisted. "They won't help," he said flatly. "These men play the system better than anyone. The police will say there's no crime until something happens." She swallowed hard, anger and fear mixing in her throat. "So what? We just wait until they come for us?" He turned to her, eyes blazing. "No. We make the first move." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" "They want me. Not you. If I step out of the shadows, draw them to me, you'll be safe." Her hands trembled. "That sounds like suicide." "That, maybe," he admitted. "But better me than you." For a long moment, the house was silent except for the tick of the kitchen clock. She studied him, the man who had once ruined families but now spoke of sacrifice. It didn't make sense, and yet, somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of belief. Finally, she shook her head. "If you're going to fight them, you're not doing it alone." His eyes widened. "What? You think I've made it this far by hiding? I've fought for everything I have. I'm not going to stop now." For the first time, He smiled, not the hollow smile of a broken man, but something steadier, something that carried hope. "Then we fight together," he said softly, and in that moment, something shifted. The fear in the house remained, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. Outside, the car engine still hummed. Inside, two unlikely allies prepared for the storm they knew was coming. The morning broke gray and restless, the kind of sky that warned of storms even when the forecast said otherwise. He woke early, restless, pacing the living room while she brewed coffee in the kitchen. Neither of them spoke much. The silence said enough. When her son finally padded down the stairs, rubbing his eyes, she forced a smile. "Come on, honey, eat quick. We'll walk together today." But the man shook his head. "Not today. They'll follow. It's too dangerous." Her brow furrowed. "What's your plan then?" He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a battered envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance shots of him meeting with someone, captured from a distance. He spread them on the table. "They want leverage. Proof I'm still connected to the old games. But it's all smoke. They only have what they think they see. If I go to them, show them I won't play, they'll have nothing to use." Her stomach knotted. "You think they'll just walk away? People like that don't let go." "I know," he admitted. "That's why I need them to focus on me, not you." She clenched her jaw, feeling the old anger surface. "And leave us exposed when they decide to punish me to get to you again. No, you're not running into their arms and leaving me in the dark." He looked at her son, who sat quietly, pushing cereal around his bowl. His small voice broke the tension. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Yes, baby," she said quickly, kissing his hair. "We're just figuring out grown-up problems." But the boy wasn't fooled. He looked at the man, eyes wide and trusting. "You're not going to leave us, right?" The man swallowed hard. "Not if I can help it." That afternoon, the black car was still there. He made his decision. "I'll confront them tonight," he said, voice steady. "No more shadows. No more waiting." She grabbed his arm, pulling him close. "If you're going, I'm going." He shook his head. "I'm not asking." She cut in firmly. "This is my home, my son. If you fight for us, I stand beside you." For a moment, he just looked at her, seeing the steel beneath the fear. Then he nodded. "All right, together." The sun had just set when they stepped outside. The streetlights flickered weakly, leaving stretches of shadow. The car engine growled as the headlights clicked on. The man walked into the middle of the street, hands visible, while she hovered at the edge, heart pounding. Two men climbed out, suits sharp, eyes colder than the night air. One was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar tracing his jaw. The other was lean, restless, cracking his knuckles like he couldn't wait. "Well, well," the scarred man said with a slow smile. "Look who finally crawled out of hiding." "My nine, you've been following me long enough," the ex-investor replied evenly. "Say what you want, and leave them out of it." The lean one laughed, harsh and bitter. "Leave them out. That little family is the only reason we haven't buried you already. You made enemies, friend. Big ones. And you don't get to choose the terms." Scarred man's smile faded. "You owe. And debt like yours doesn't vanish just because you played hero for one lucky woman." "She doesn't owe you anything," the ex-investor said sharply. "This is between me and the ghosts I made. You want repayment? Take it from me." The scarred man's gaze slid to her, standing tense at the curb. "Funny thing about debts, they tend to spread. Like rot. Maybe we take what matters to you. See how fast you crawl." Her breath caught. She wanted to run inside, lock the door, hide with her son. But instead, She stepped forward, her voice steady though her heart raced. "You're not touching my family. Not again. Not ever." The men laughed, but something in their eyes flickered a flash of irritation, of realizing she wasn't as fragile as they hoped. The ex-investor stepped closer, closing the space between them. "You want to break me? Fine. But you'll have to do it in front of everyone." He nodded toward the street, where neighbors had begun peeking through curtains, phones glowing in the dark. The scarred man cursed under his breath. Exposure wasn't part of their plan. They thrived in shadows, not under watchful eyes. The lean one hissed, "We can end this now." But Scar raised a hand to stop him. "This isn't over," Scar muttered. He jabbed a finger at the ex-investor's chest. "We'll collect, one way or another." Then they turned, sliding back into the car. The tires squealed as they sped away, leaving the night tense but quieter. For a long moment, the street was silent except for distant barking dogs. She let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You just made them angrier," she whispered. "Maybe," he admitted, shoulders sagging. "But for now, you're safe." She wanted to argue, to tell him this wasn't safety at all, just a pause before the storm. But when she looked at him, really looked, she saw a man who was finally standing in front of the consequences instead of running. Her son appeared at the door, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what's going on?" She forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just grown-up stuff. Go back to bed." But even as the boy disappeared upstairs, she knew it wasn't nothing. The danger was still there. Only now, for the first time, they were facing it together. And in that fragile alliance, something like hope began to take root. The quiet after the confrontation didn't last. For 3 days, the street seemed calm, the car gone, the house undisturbed, but both of them knew it was only a matter of time. Fear lingered in the air, like smoke that refused to clear. On the 4th night, the knock came. Not polite, not patient, heavy, demanding. She froze mid-step in the kitchen, spoon clattering into the sink. He stood instantly, shoulders tight, every instinct screaming that this was it. "Stay with your boy," he told her in a low voice. "No," she whispered fiercely. "Not again. We face this together." Another knock, louder this time. Her son's small voice floated down from the stairs. "Mom? Who's at the door?" "Back to bed, sweetheart," she called, her voice trembling. She forced a calm tone she didn't feel. The man crossed to the door and opened it slowly. The scarred man stood there, flanked by 2 others, their presence blotting out the night. No neighbors peeked now. The street was too quiet, as if it had been cleared. "You thought you were clever," Scar sneered, "dragging us into the light. But shadows always win in the end." Behind him, the lean one cracked his knuckles, eager, hungry. The 3rd man pulled something from his coat, steel glinting faintly under the porch light. "Not here," the ex-investor said quickly. "Not with her son inside." "Not exactly here," Scar replied coldly. "You ruined families. You left people, broke, desperate. Tonight, you watch someone you care about pay the price." The woman's breath hitched, but she stepped forward, planting herself beside the man. Her heart was pounding, but her eyes didn't waver. "If you want him, take him. But you don't get to hurt a child. Not mine." The scarred man tilted his head, studying her. Then he smirked. "Braver than I expected." The ex-investor's hands clenched into fists. He'd spent years running, bargaining, hiding. But as the knife caught the light, he knew there was only one choice left. "You want me? Fine. Take me. But you leave them alone." His voice rang with a strength he hadn't felt in years. The lean man lunged first, but the ex-investor met him head-on, tackling him off the porch. They crashed into the yard, fists flying, bodies thrashing against the grass. The woman cried out but didn't move. She knew if she stepped in, she'd only put herself and her son in more danger. Scar watched, arms crossed, as if the fight were entertainment. The ex-investor managed to land a punch, splitting the lean one's lip, but then pain seared across his ribs as the knife wielder slashed shallow, tearing through his shirt. He staggered, gasping. The woman grabbed the phone, dialing with shaking hands. "Police," she whispered. "Now." But the fight raged too fast. The ex-investor swung wildly, desperation fueling him. The lean one went down, groaning, clutching his jaw. But the knife was still there, flashing again. This time, the ex-investor stepped into the blade, grabbing the man's wrist with both hands, forcing it away from the house. Away from her. The steel cut deep into his arm, hot blood soaking his sleeve. But he didn't let go. With a guttural roar, he twisted, slamming the knife hand against the ground until the weapon clattered free. He kicked it across the yard, just as sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Scar cursed under his breath. The neighbors had called, or maybe she had. Either way, time was short. He barked an order, and his men scrambled back to the car, dragging the wounded lean man with them. The engine roared to life, tires screeching as they vanished into the night. The ex-investor collapsed to his knees, clutching his bleeding arm. She ran to him, dropping beside him, tears blurring her vision. "You're insane," she whispered, pressing her hands over the wound. "You could have been killed." He looked at her. Pain etched into every line of his face. But his eyes were steady. "Better me than you. Better me than him." She shook her head, sobbing. "Why? Why would you do this?" His voice was hoarse, but the words were clear. "Because for once in my life, I wanted to save someone instead of destroying them." The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights painting the street. Neighbors reappeared at their windows, whispers carrying through the night. She held him tighter, refusing to let him slip into unconsciousness. "Stay with me," she begged. "You're not leaving us like this." He smiled faintly, blood staining his teeth. "You said, no more lies. So here it is. I don't care what happens to me. Just keep your home. Keep him safe. That's all that matters." Her tears fell freely, soaking his shirt. For the first time, she understood this wasn't about debt or redemption in theory. This was sacrifice in its purest form. When the police arrived, they found him half-conscious, her arms around him, her son peeking fearfully from the doorway. Paramedics lifted him onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled him away, he managed one last glance at her. Not of guilt, not of shame. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. He lay on the bed, pale but alive, his bandaged arm resting across his chest. Outside the door, police officers paced, waiting for their chance to question him. Inside, she sat in a chair pulled close, her son curled against her side, both refusing to leave. When his eyes fluttered open, it was her face he saw, first tired, tear-streaked, but unshaken. "You're awake," she whispered, relief breaking in her voice. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. She poured water, held the straw to his lips. When he drank, her hand lingered, steadying his. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice weak but laced with guilt. "I brought danger into your home." She shook her head firmly. "You brought yourself between us and danger. Don't twist it. You bled for us." Her son leaned closer, small fingers gripping his uninjured hand. "You scared me." the boy admitted, his voice trembling. "But you made them go away." Tears stung his eyes as he squeezed the child's hand gently. "I promised I'd keep you safe." "I meant it." The next days were a blur of recovery and questions. Police officers pressed him for names, for connections, for the full weight of the debts he owed. For once, he didn't hide. He gave them everything he knew. He was tired of shadows. If exposure was the cost of protecting them, he would pay it. News spread quickly. Neighbors who once whispered about the stranger in her house now spoke of the night he stood against armed men, of how he shielded a single mother and her boy. The narrative shifted from ex-convict to protector, from pariah to man willing to stand between innocence and harm. For her, it was a strange transformation to witness. She had spent years hiding from the shame of her own struggles, fearing pity more than poverty. Now she found herself at the center of a story she hadn't chosen. The woman whose home had been defended by the man who once ruined families. One evening, weeks later, she walked into his hospital room, carrying a paper bag of food. He was sitting up now, color returning to his face, flipping through a worn book. He looked up, surprised. "You didn't have to." "I know," she interrupted, setting the bag down. "But you're tired of hospital food." He chuckled faintly, then winced at the pull on his healing arm. "You're not wrong." They ate in quiet for a while, the sound of plastic forks scraping against cartons filling the silence. Finally, she set hers aside and looked at him squarely. "You saved us. I don't know how to repay that." Says. He met her gaze, his voice soft but steady. "Don't. You don't owe me anything. Maybe that's the point. For once, I didn't do it for a deal or a return. I did it because it was right." She studied him, seeing not the man who had destroyed lives, but the man who had chosen pain over running, sacrifice over safety. "You can't change the past," she said quietly, "but maybe you've changed the ending." His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't speak. Finally, he nodded. "That's all I ever wanted to prove to myself. I wasn't beyond saving." Her son piped up suddenly, his child's voice cutting through the heavy air. "You're like a superhero now, but without the cape." "How?" He laughed, the sound raw but genuine. "Not a superhero, kid. Just a man trying to make up for his mistakes." In the weeks that followed, the police cracked down on the group that had haunted him. With his testimony, doors opened, cases were built. The black car never returned to her street. The shadows receded. By the time he left the hospital, the air felt lighter. He walked slowly, still healing, but with his head high. She met him outside with her boy at her side. Neighbors watched from porches, not with suspicion this time, but with nods of respect. "Where will you go?" she asked as they stood in the sunlight. He looked at her house in the distance, the place he had nearly ruined but ultimately saved. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "Maybe it's not about where I go, but who I try to be. From now on." She smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "Then be the man my son thinks you are. That's more than enough." The boy grabbed his hand again, tugging gently. "Will you still visit?" His chest tightened, but he smiled. "If your mom lets me." For a moment, there was silence. Just the sound of wind rustling the leaves. And in that quiet, something unspoken passed between them, not romance, not obligation, but a fragile thread of trust, rebuilt from ruin. As he walked away down the street, neighbors still watching, he realized something profound. Redemption wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't one act of sacrifice. It was a choice, made again and again, even when no one was looking. He had failed so many times before. But this time, with the memory of a boy's trust and a mother's courage, he chose differently. and for the first time in years, he believed it might be enough.